What an absolute wild ride it was. The 2025 Cleveland Browns NFL draft, all done from the beginning, which was crazy, to the end, which brought a major surprise. We're going to cover the 7 selections the Cleveland Browns made right now. Browns 3D of the OBO begins now. Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends, your daily delivery of all things dogpound. Browns 3D on the OBR is brought to you by statewide sharpening, mower sales and service. Appreciate them for a great run these past few months. We appreciate all of you. Almost 30,000 into the OBR draft cave this weekend. When we started it all Thursday night at 7 o'clock, we were just getting the beginning rumors of the possibility and the legitimacy of the Browns trading down from the number 2 overall selection. Weren't really sure how to take it, so here we were trying to preview, certainly, you know, pick number 2, which we spent so many months bantying about. And then everybody's kind of checking their phones and going through and leaning out to, of course, Lane Atkins. We're leaning out, of course, to Brad Stainbrook, who was feverishly trying to get to the building in Berea. Frank Breatham, of course, and just trying to get all the information we could. And then all of a sudden, as we were getting ready to basically kick it off for real at 8 o'clock, there it was. There it was. The Browns were trading down from number 2 overall to number 5 with Jacksonville, an absolute haul. And then you get the first selection. But again, make sure you are subscribed to the OBR streaming network, OBR on YouTube, OBR over on Twitch. And again, just so much thanks to all of you for the support these last 4 months, and certainly over this weekend as we did our darndest to cover the living daylights out of the Cleveland Browns 2025 NFL draft. So now, with the trade official, Hunter goes to Jacksonville. Abdul Carter, I sigh, goes off to the New York Giants. And Lawrence Taylor, you got a lot of nerve. Let the kid wear your jersey number. Number 4, Will Campbell. And then the Cleveland Browns are up with the number 5 overall selection. Browns go ahead and pull the trigger at number 5 on defensive tackle Mason Graham at the University of Michigan. There was a theme with these Cleveland Browns draft selections. The theme was young, really good players who were also really good people. At least this was for the first 5, as far as maybe the age thing. Graham, consensus All-American at the University of Michigan. Turned it on in the playoffs 2 years ago to lead Michigan to a national championship. A lot of people originally had issues with this pick and brought up pass rush. He's only 21. And if you ask NFL people, you ask draft evaluators, what is more difficult to learn? To become a plus run defender or to learn how to improve as a pass rusher? Everybody's always going to say, give me the guy that can stop the run first. You could always work on your pass rush moves. You can always. Why was the importance of a guy with such a run plus positive for Mason Graham an important pick for the Browns? This team gave up over 2,200 yards on the ground last year. The touchdowns, numerous, well into the 20s as well. 4.5 yards per carry. The Cleveland Browns in the run game on defense last year got bullied. That's a fact. There was certainly some talk about, the inner part between the hashes of the Cleveland Browns defense last year, maybe being a little bit soft. I'd say undermanned. But some people said soft. You bring Graham in to a defensive tackle room right now that has Shelby Harris here, that has veteran Malik Collins, who should really be an advantage player for the Browns in nickel and dime situations. He's a great interior pass rusher. Mike Hall, who was their number 2 selection last year, Mike was really starting to come on as the year was going on last year. Had the injury in the final week against the Baltimore Ravens. Hopefully, Hall is a guy we can kind of get a medical update here on the next couple of weeks to see where he is in his process. Looked pretty good on video walking into the building, though, this past week as voluntary organized team activities began for the Cleveland Browns. Hall, definitely a guy that the Browns are probably looking at to be a contributor early, first down, second down scenarios. But Mike Hall is also a guy certainly who will be able to contribute in pass rush sets as well with a guy like Graham. And then you throw in last year's 7th round selection, Juwan Briggs. And it was a weird go of it for Juwan Briggs. He originally didn't make the 53-man roster, was put on, of course, the practice squad. Browns probably waited longer than they needed to because the season was just getting away from them. There was no reason to start not evaluating the younger players. But by the time you got Juwan Briggs onto the field, got, 2 games or so under his belt, get his feet wet, you saw what made Juwan Briggs the selection that the Browns had made in that spring's draft. Good young player, was finding his way. I've talked about this team and covered this team since 2017. And I've always kind of had an issue with the defensive tackle room. And there were years, say 2023, where they put together a decent room, but it didn't necessarily have any sustainability. Well, that's changed now because for the next 3 seasons, you will have Mason Graham, you will have Mike Hall, and you will have Juwan Briggs under contracts. You've got a Shelby Harris here for this year. You have Malik Collins here for this year. But the core of the defensive tackle room for the Cleveland Browns is absolutely intact now. And that's something that this franchise really hasn't been able to get right. A lot of it, was poor picks. Ika, Perrion Winfrey. It's not that they didn't try, but it didn't necessarily pan out. But it looks like there's a really, really solid nucleus for that defensive tackle room right now, going further for the Cleveland Browns. So round 1 ends, and of course, everybody, and we were here late Thursday night. What are the Browns going to do at 33? Honestly, felt because you had 33 and you had 36, it was automatically going to lead to a quarterback selection. Because the way I viewed it is now it gave you extra ammunition. I didn't want to trade up for a quarterback. I wasn't going to have to. Clearly, the Browns view the quarterback position differently. And to be fair, there were guys we were ready to pull the trigger on at 33. One of them, most notably, went number 92 overall. Another one, notably, went 144th overall. And we'll get to him in just a little bit. They stay at 33. They select linebacker Carson Swessinger out of UCLA. First thing, and I think everybody probably had the same reaction, is, what does this tell us about Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah? They spoke on it. They didn't, again, give any real solid concrete information one way or the other. And the last 2 updates we've gotten on JOK are that, there was necessarily not an update. But to Swessinger, 6'2", 240. The film pops. He led the entire country in solo tackles in 2024 with 90. It's an impressive number. That makes it more impressive for Carson Swessinger is his first 2 years at UCLA, he didn't really do much. He played special teams. They had a guy they liked at the linebacker position, kicked him up to edge, gave Swessinger the opportunity. And you want to talk about a guy who just exploded onto the scene as far as becoming a draft prospect. Carson Swessinger certainly was one of those guys. And I think the thing that really impresses me the most with Carson Swessinger and the selection of him here is you look at the tape from last year and what he did, And again, you take into account this was his first year starting. There really, really could be yet another jump in overall play, overall performance, and overall production from Carson Swessinger. Just getting started. And another thing that I find really, really impressive with Carson Swessinger is with not getting much of an opportunity his first 2 years in Westwood at UCLA. Easily, and I had heard this from a couple of people who messaged me Friday night when the pick for Pierce came in. He easily could have been a guy that decided to go to the transfer portal route. Wasn't really getting no run. UCLA made a commitment to him. He paid them off. And more importantly, Carson Swessinger paid himself off. You know, I felt that the Browns had already kind of had a contingency plan at the linebacker position. Brought in Jerome Baker, brought back Devin Bush. You still had Hicks, Mahmoud Diabate, wherever. This is now a deep group. Buki Wilson also in there as well. Buki Watson, rather. Really, really a deep group right now. If they get you, okay, this is an outstanding group. But Carson Swessinger was the pick at 33. And the Browns got a guy who looks like he's got nothing but potential in front of him. We're going to continue on here. Your latest Browns 3D. We appreciate y'all for sticking around. We've been super excited about how the relationship between ourselves and State Sharpening, Mower Sales and Service in Broadview Heights has gone over the last few months. If you are local to the Cleveland area, they're your one-stop shop for all things lawn equipment. Listen, you want to spend your Sundays watching the Browns, not cutting your grass. Let the guys at State help you get your weekend back. They specialize in both residential and commercial equipment for Toro, the brand professionals have counted on for more than 100 years. Whether you're looking for a new, dependable time cutter zero turn, genuine Toro replacement parts, or expert service from experienced technicians who keep your mower in peak condition, State has got your back. They are veteran owned. The Kane family are lifetime Clevelanders. They are lifetime Browns fans and proud supporters of all of us here at the OBR. Again, if you are local to Cleveland, State Sharpening, Mower Sales and Service in Broadview Heights is your hometown team for all your lawn equipment needs. All their info is at statesharp.com. That is STATESHARP.com. This is Jeff Lloyd. This is Browns 3D on the OBR. We are recapping the Browns 2025 draft class. Again, a wild weekend, trade at the top. The ending of the Shaddor Sanders saga at pick 141. A wild, wild weekend for the Cleveland Browns and their 2025 draft class. There was a lot of scuttlebutt, and a lot of us were hearing it, that the Browns may have been supremely interested in selecting Travion Henderson early in round 2. Not sure what exactly happened with the intel or how it all worked out. But 33 was Carson Swessinger. 36 was on the clock. A lot of us thought maybe it was going to be Travion Henderson. It was a Buckeye running back. But however, it was Quinshon Judkins. I'm not going to lie, and I will be transparent and honest. I really, really like Travion Henderson's game. You guys knew this. I labeled him several times as my favorite running back in this class. But ask anybody. It was really hard to say which running back in this class was your favorite. It was so deep, and it was so talented. I think in the end, for the Browns, what was maybe the thing that tipped the scales towards Quinshon Judkins was overall career body of work. It wasn't 200 carries in 2024, but it was well over 200 carries in 22 and 23 at Ole Miss. His first year in Columbus certainly led to 16 total touchdowns, 14 on the ground, 2 as a receiver. Played big when it mattered. Notre Dame. That game was huge, obviously. Physical. Kind of looks for contact sometimes. Not necessarily something I'm generally in favor for. But I labeled Judkins as I use the term bumper car running back. A guy that just seems to find contact and does sometimes go looking for contact. But make no mistake about it. The size makeup, the athleticism he ran in the 4.4s, his jumps at 38 in the vert, 11 in the broad, lets you know that even though he is this physical runner, he's got some juice to him and he's got some athleticism to him. It was a really, really nice addition to be excited about. And it was kind of interesting that a team with the analytic approach did go running back in round two. It brought up just, the thought of, sometimes you've got to basically go against what you truly believe. And if you thought this guy was the difference maker, you put the analytics to the side. And I think that was truly the case when they made the selection of Judkins. And they needed players, skill players, who were able to create and make things happen. We talked about this the entire draft process. We certainly talked about it during the live stream during the draft, how important it was to improve the skill position. I don't think they had much faith in this year's wide receiver class because there were several opportunities to go ahead and address it. And every time the opportunity was there, it seemed the Cleveland Browns kind of duck and run from it. Still, desperately need a wide receiver. And we'll see how the Browns handle that. But it is still a huge, huge need. Does it mean that you could look into bringing back an Elijah Moore? Does it mean you look at the Green Bay Packers or perhaps the New England Patriots, who appear to be really deep right now at the wide receiver position, and try to maybe see if you can shake somebody off of their roster? Certainly things to consider. You went to round three, and the run of tight ends was well on its way. And this is a guy the Browns had met with, came in for a top 30 visit. Certainly a local guy, Canton, McKinley High School. Harold Fannon Jr. went to Bowling Green on a full ride. Bowling Green really didn't have much idea what they were even going to do with him at the time. Ended up as a freshman, sprinkling him in a little bit as a tight end, even using him as a wildcat quarterback, which led to him scoring 4 touchdowns on the ground as a freshman. And then it was full-time tight end. Had a very, very nice sophomore year. Had a ridiculous junior year. 111 receptions, 1,500 yards, 11 touchdowns. Ideally, not the perfect size you're looking for as a tight end. Maybe a little bit undersized height-wise. Weight probably a little low for a full-time tight end one, and that's okay because I don't think the Browns need him to do that for them right now. His athletic numbers testing-wise were not fantastic. He did run a really nice 3-cone. But you watch the tape of Harold Fannon Jr., and I think his most athletic trait is his athletic intelligence. With the ball in his hands in the open field, he kind of sees things like a split second ahead of everybody else, which allows him to overcome the fact that, he's not an elite athlete as far as testing numbers will give you. The Browns can use him anywhere. He can line up as a big slot. He certainly can line up as an H-back. He could line up on the outside if he wanted to. I'm sure there'll be some looks where maybe you give him or even line him up in the backfield. If you keep him there, you motion him out. A million things you can do. We know how much the Browns like their screen game. We know how much the Browns like their tight end screen game. Bringing in a guy like Fannon, who basically you would just say is, what's his position? He's a guy that can highly be involved as a pass receiver. Where he lines up ain't going to matter. Blocking, it's not top shelf, but he will absolutely give you everything he's got. High motor, high character, high talent. This was a really fun selection for an offense that really, really needs some juice. So Harold Fannon certainly was the selection for them at 67. Things started to get a little bit wonky at 94, right? Again, a guy like Shaddor Sanders is on the clock. Everybody's thinking, well, what are the Browns going to do? You know what? Wide receiver, wide receiver, wide receiver. We had gotten a running back. We had gotten a tight end. You actually made 2 of your first picks on defense. Everybody wanted to criticize that, even though there was a guy who screamed, "Hey, get the defense a little bit something, and then you can spend a majority in on offense." The Browns pull the name Dylan Gabriel out of the hat, and it got a little crazy. Um, Gabriel, 6-year college player, don't play most of the season at 24 years old, not even 6 feet tall. Played at UCF, played at Oklahoma, played at Oregon, thrown for almost 18,000 yards in college, most touchdown passes in the history of collegiate football. Certainly an asterisk next to that. But just overall, great personality, great leader. Me personally, when this pick was first made, I thought, here's a guy at worst is your full-time backup quarterback, for the majority of his rookie contract. I think the Browns want a lot of stability in that quarterback room. I think they are tired of the fact that every time they turned around, the room was different. Always shuffling guys in, shuffling guys out, year to year, week to week, month to month. We all know the way it worked, right, guys? His team played multiple quarterbacks over 2 seasons in a row, and I think we're just absolutely tired of it. They want, you know, continuity in that quarterback room, week to week, month to month, season to season. We all understand that, the Browns now hold 2 first-round picks in 2026, and ideally, one of those picks could be a quarterback. But between the selection of Dylan Gabriel here, and we will get to Mr. Sanders in a little bit, the Browns may have got a jump start on that. It's not inconceivable that Sanders nor Gabriel could be a starting quarterback for the Cleveland Browns. Gabriel's resume speaks for himself. Yes, a little bit short. Yes, not an ideal athlete. Same case, maybe as far as the athleticism for Sanders. But Dylan Gabriel can play. And at his age, maybe he is more, dog eared for a potential backup quarterback role for this team. But this was a smart move. And again, as millions have said, if you reordered and rejumbled these picks, which you certainly could have, and the Browns came out with the same class, everybody would have been more than okay with the way this draft class turned out. And I'm going to tell you this. If Dylan Gabriel is on the Cleveland Browns roster for the entirety of his rookie contract, plays a little, proves to be a viable backup as far as playing the position, or a guy holding the iPad, or a guy in the meeting room, nobody's going to care that they spent selection 94 overall in the 2025 NFL draft on Dylan Gabriel. One of my absolute favorite players in this class was the Browns' next selection. Right up there with Travion Henderson. If you asked me for a second favorite, it would have been Dylan Samson. The Browns admitted they didn't think they were going to look to draft 2 running backs this year. Samson on the board was just too good. I and others here at the OBR told you for months that we really thought this would be a perfect double dip opportunity. Because even still, with the analytic approach is not to extend running back contracts. They did for Nick Chubb because he was absolutely the guy to break the mold. They're in a weird situation right now with Jerome Ford, who, due to how much he's played and his performance over the last couple of years, now has a salary bump that's up to $3.4 million. Might not be a number the Browns are comfortable with. This has happened in the past with a couple of players. Harrison Bryant was one of them, where they basically had to rework the deal to keep him around. So we'll see the way it works out ultimately for Jerome Ford, and certainly something to monitor as the weeks and months to come. But they did double dip, and they went ahead and took Dylan Samson. Dylan Samson scored 22 touchdowns last season, broke the Tennessee rushing touchdown record. And now, just to get back to what I was saying earlier about the improvement in the skill position that the Browns absolutely needed, between Quinshawn Judkins, Harold Fannon, and now Dylan Samson, those 3 combined in their final seasons of college in 2024, combined for 49 touchdowns. These are the types of guys that Browns needed, and they got it. We've all heard about the emphasis to try to get back to the old system as far as running the ball. Certainly works with a guy like Dylan Samson. He's talked about spread runs. He's talked about pulling offensive linemen. Actually, gave the kudos of it, just makes my life easier. 5'8" and change, 200 and change. Great short yardage runner. One of the biggest misconceptions in football is that everybody thinks the big guy is always the good short yardage runner. Not the case, certainly when it goes to Dylan Samson. At 5'8", 200, certainly has the ability to get even smaller in the tight windows. There's plenty of instances where you don't necessarily see Dylan Samson getting through the gap, getting through the linebacker area, and all of a sudden there's Dylan Samson putting a one cut and see you on a safety and taking it to the house. It's a great selection. I love the pairing of them with Quinshawn Judkins. Both of them can kind of assist you in the passing game. Certainly will be something that both are going to need to improve upon playing in Kevin Stefanski's system. But I really, really like the selection, and I really like the pairing of a running back room going forward of Quinshawn Judkins and Dylan Samson. Major points for me, the way that is constructed. And I think the thing that the Browns probably love more than anything is it's 4 years of controlled contract on a rookie deal for two guys that should easily be able to rip them off 2,000 yards per season, and probably somewhere in the 20 to 20 touchdown range is the capabilities of what these two guys together can bring this team. So now we were sitting with 2 picks left for the Browns, and at the time, I guess it was 166 and 192. And how are we going to play this out? Can you finally get a receiver here? Whatever you get at 192, maybe some sort of developmental offensive lineman, offensive tackle. And then all of a sudden, a trade flicker went off, and the Cleveland Browns took 166 and 192 and jumped up to 144 right in front of the Philadelphia Eagles and finally put an ending to the Shaddor Sanders slide. The Browns did extensive work on Shaddor Sanders, as they did Cam Ward, as they did every other quarterback in this class, pretty much. They needed him. They wanted him. They weren't sure what to make of him. That's why they didn't have one to pick at number 2. That's why they ended up moving down to accumulate more assets, to maybe find a way to address it somehow, some way this year, and then maybe put it as a bullet point for the 2026 NFL draft, which when this draft started, they held 2 first-round picks for. The whole Sanders thing is definitely probably got a little 30 for 30 to it. And, we spoke about it certainly on the live stream. I spoke about it when I sat down with John Costco from PFF on Friday. I kind of got to the point where I felt bad for the kid, because maybe sometimes the sins of the father were being put on the son. And I just didn't feel it was right. Even though I tried to tell you all for months, Sanders and the Browns at 2 just wasn't a thing. It was hard to go back then and revisit the Sanders thing, because you figured he'd sneak in around 1. I mean, all your major outlets, Daniel Jeremiah, most all of these guys, felt he was an absolute slam dunk to go to number 21 over all the Pittsburgh Steelers. And then it didn't happen. And then the Saints passed again for Tyler Shuck. Browns didn't address it with either of the round 2 selections. Could have done it at 94, didn't do it then. Steelers could have done it in the 3rd round. They didn't do it. So it just continued and continued and certainly continued. I had some conversations right as this pick basically went off. And if you were watching the stream, you noticed I muted myself out and I actually took a phone call. I wouldn't have normally done that, but it was the name that was calling in to talk to me about the Shaddor Sanders selection that I just couldn't turn down. And the conversation we had was, yeah, you could have taken him over Dylan Gabriel and still taken Dylan Gabriel later. It's semantics that you can just argue about now, but ain't going to mean a hill of beans whenever this path and how this all works out is going to mean. With a guy like Gabriel, he's an absolute attention to detail guy. And Shaddor, and none of us know if this is true. I think a lot of it just assume it's true. We don't know what his life was like being the Colorado quarterback with his dad being the head coach. It appears, for all intents and purposes, that Dion was just as hard as on him as he is any other player, and there's no reason to believe otherwise. But what I got in that phone conversation was the negatives that most people had on Shaddor Sanders. Always had played for his father. The system was tailored to his best abilities, which, to be fair, was a crock. There's not a college system going that you're not going to try to cater your offense to your quarterback, right? Who's going to do that? Oh, well, let's make it really hard so the kid stinks and we're not very good and everybody loses their jobs. Of course, the offense is going to be catered to what you feel the best abilities of your quarterback are. But the thing from that phone conversation that I had gotten yesterday was your negatives were never going to be, there's nothing you could have done about the negatives unless you selected him. It's Shador's time on his own now. And this is what aggravated me about the whole entire thing was it didn't feel like he was the one charting the course for his own process. Well, now he's a Cleveland Brown, a team that did like him and liked him a lot. It's all on him now. Be the quarterback. Can he beat out a Kenny Pickett, a Joe Flacco at 40 years old? Probably could. Maybe won't. Just because when you draft the guy in the 5th round, you have the ability to show some patience with him that maybe you're not afforded when you draft him, say number 2 overall. But Shador's now got this life for himself. And, how he handles it, this is all going to come down on him. And it seems when he finally did get picked, obviously the weight was lifted, jumped in the pool to celebrate. Dion didn't. Dion builds pools. He doesn't go in them, apparently. Forever Dion Sanders. But again, the point of that phone call that I took yesterday during the stream was that the negatives you had on, does dad have too much control? Things get, all of that had nothing to necessarily do. And you were never going to be able to answer those questions unless you just drafted him. Who's he going to handle himself when he's not the Colorado program anywhere that's coached by his dad? Well, I don't know. Nobody knows. But now we need to find out. Mel Kiper, and I think Mel maybe went love Mel Kiper, but I think maybe went a little bit over the top with it. But I don't think his point was essentially wrong. Maybe he just carried it a little bit too long. Like when you argue with your spouse and you go to bed and you think it's over, and then all of a sudden, 2 hours later, the next day, somebody, oh, by the way, how about last night? I have a counterpoint to subset 36/B. Mel did take it a little, but I don't disagree with what Mel was saying. The whole thing just seemed really, really odd on its face. No, he was never worth number 2 overall, but he was worth a hell of a lot more than number 144 overall. There's no question about that. We've got a lot to get to this week, and as far as being and doing Cleveland Brown shows, this is probably my favorite week of the year. The draft shows are awesome. They all, but they're all spec. Now you've got a draft class, and we can comment on each and every one of these picks, get a little bit deeper, get under the hood, and I'm actually super excited and stoked to absolutely do that. But once again, your Cleveland Browns 2025 draft class. Number 2 overall, defensive tackle Mason Graham, University of Michigan. 33 overall, linebacker Carson Swessinger, UCLA. 36 overall, running back Quinshawn Judkins, the Ohio State. 67 offensive weapon, because that's what I'm going to call him, Harold Fannon Jr., Bowling Green. 94 quarterback Dylan Gabriel out of Oregon. 126 running back Dylan Samson, Tennessee Volunteers. And finally, selection 144 overall, Quarterback, Shaddor Sanders, University of Colorado. Great job by the Cleveland Browns front office throughout the entire process. Magnificent job trading from 2 to 5, collecting more assets, and most importantly, an extra first round pick in 2026. For those already asking, the Browns currently hold 9 selections in the 2026 NFL Draft. I am Jeff Lloyd. Again, we just want to thank each and every one of you for your support over the weekend. It was a long weekend, tiring weekend, a lot of work, but fun as all get out. We appreciate all of you who turned out. Damn near 30,000 plus in the 3 days of streaming. Again, you guys are all too awesome. Make sure you subscribe. We are on YouTube. We are on Twitch, of course. This has been Browns 3D, brought to you by State Sharpening Mower Sales and Service. This has been your daily delivery of all things dog pound. Browns 3D on the OBR, and we'll talk to you all again soon.